Apple's got a whole bunch of new MacBook Air and iPad Pro updates today. Of course, I'm the most interested in the MacBook Air ones. Chiefly among them, it brings the MacBook Air back down to that classic $999 price. When MacBook Air was $999 years ago, I always said it was the most universally useful laptop that you could buy, especially if you were a college student or just starting out. Maybe you were starting your own company, maybe you were a writer or a screenwriter, even for photographers and other creative design people, as long as you weren't working in super high resolution 4K video, things like that, you could get by with the old classic MacBook Air. But over time, the MacBook Air, well, it started to get a little dated looking. Certainly originally for $999, it was a lot better than most of the Windows laptops you could get at around the same price. Maybe they would have similar CPUs, but the MacBook Air was machined out of this one piece of solid aluminum. It had a fantastic design. It had a great screen for the time. It had that awesome touchpad that really still nobody can touch. However, over the years, they didn't really update it that much. They wanted you to buy the MacBook Pro. They wanted you to buy the 12-inch MacBook, things like that. So eventually, the Air was feeling pretty old. In 2018, they did finally get around to updating it. They turned it into something that's a lot more like the 13-inch MacBook Pro, and that's a good thing. However, they raised the price from that classic $999 up to, I think, $1199. Since then, it's come back down to $1099, and a lot of the stores still sell it for $999, but that was an important psychological barrier. The fact that your MacBook Air was your go-to $999 laptop, and we did not have that for a few years. Until now, the new MacBook Air again starts at $999, which makes me think, hey, this is going to be the great default go-to laptop for just about everybody. In addition to that, they've made a couple of other changes as well that I think are very welcome. They have finally given up the ghost, at least in part, on that butterfly keyboard, that super flat keyboard that nobody ever really liked. I think a lot of the hate for that keyboard was overblown. At the same time, I'm not going to go around defending it, at least not too much. Now, they put that in that original 12-inch MacBook, which is a system they don't make anymore, back in, I think, maybe 2015, and it wasn't great there. And then they insisted on bringing it to the MacBook Pro and the MacBook Air. And soon everybody had the butterfly keyboard. Nobody was happy, even though they did a few revisions here and there. Well, in the fall of 2019, Apple said, hey, 15-inch MacBook Pro, you are now a 16-inch MacBook Pro. That was extraordinary because it left us without a 15-inch Apple laptop for the first time in basically forever, since the beginning of the MacBook era. But also, they took that keyboard and they swapped it out for something that looked and felt a lot the same, but was really much better under the hood. They called it the Magic Keyboard because it was based on those standalone Magic keyboards that Apple sells, the little ones that you could buy for your iMac or just buy and use with anything else. So it's a better keyboard. It's got a little rubber cap underneath it to keep all that dust and grime out, and that's what was messing up a lot of the butterfly keyboards. So now you have this better keyboard in the 16-inch MacBook Pro, but not in anything else. Well, here comes the new MacBook Air. It's now got that Magic Keyboard. I have not had a chance to try it in person yet. I just heard about it this morning, but I feel like it's going to feel a lot like it did on the 16th, which was pretty darn good. That does leave us, however, with the 13-inch MacBook Pro as the odd man out. It's the only one that still has the old keyboard, which frankly at this point no one's really going to want. You're going to want the newer keyboard design. Now, in order to make this even more competitive with the MacBook Pro, you can now get 10th gen Intel quad-core processors in the MacBook Air. And I said, oh, that's very exciting. I did look a little closer at the fine print, and maybe it was not quite that exciting because for $999, you're not getting that. You're getting a dual-core chip, which again, I'm sure it's fine for everyday computing use and streaming video and doing basic office stuff and basic school stuff. It's also a Core i3. Now, you can't always read all that much into the CPU designations on these different systems, but you don't really want, for $1,000, an Intel Core i3 dual-core system. That's what you find in, some Black Friday doorbusters, although I'm sure, again, this is much better. It's psychological in a way. So for $100, you can trade up and get the quad-core Core i5. That takes you back up to $1099, although frankly, if you really want to get a new MacBook Air, that's what I would do. Also, these guys all have across the board still 8 gigs of RAM. For a Windows laptop, unconscionable. For a MacBook, they're efficient enough in how the OS works that you can get away with it, but you're probably still going to want 16 gigs of RAM, and if you upgrade to that, that's an extra $200, and that takes you up into the second base model, which is $1299. That one you have to, again, pay $200 to get the 16 gigs of RAM over 8, but it also doubles the storage space, so you get 512 instead of 256. But even that's good because the MacBook Air was one of those laptops that was just locked into only giving you 128 gigs of storage space. That's like less than on your phone probably. And once you have the OS overhead, and if you're working on video and photos, the higher resolutions, new versions of those tend to eat up a lot of space. If you dare to play some games on your Mac, there are a few, and you download big game files, those can be 20, 30, 40, 50 gigabytes each. So 128 is not really going to cut it anymore, which is why having, even in the base model, 256 gigabytes of storage, well, that's great. Do I wish it also had 16 gigs of RAM? You bet I do. But again, we're talking about a $999 laptop, not just a $999 laptop, but one from Apple, which is not known for giving you, all the great features at the entry-level price. They want you to do that little trade-up calculation and go, oh, it's $100 here and $100 there. So that said, when I was going through all the configurations in my mind, I said, okay, well, I want more RAM, and I guess I'll more storage too, and I definitely want the quad-core CPU, and all of a sudden, it was $1,500 in my head, and here we are talking about that perfect $999 laptop. So if you're a everyday consumer who just wants an awesome MacBook to take to school, use for your startup company, write that great novel or screenplay on, do a little bit of graphic design, work on your website or anything like that, stick with the $999 base model, but take extra $100. I hate to even get past $1,000, but take that $100, get the quad-core Core i5. Your laptop will